The Great Depression had nothing to do with the stock market crash, and most people have no idea what actually caused it. In this video, a caveman is going to break down one of the most misunderstood economic disasters in American history. These are the real facts, the ones that most history classes skip over. Here is the thing. Almost everything people think they know about the Great Depression is either wrong or only half the story. Number 1. The stock market crash did not cause the Great Depression. Okay, Caveman sees big number go down on Wall Street in 1929. Everyone panic. Everyone say stock market crash caused depression. But wait, here is problem with that story. In 1929, about 90% of American households owned 0 stocks. Not 1 share, nothing. So when the market crashed, most regular people did not lose a single dollar from the market itself. Caveman scratch head. If almost nobody owned stocks, how did a stock crash hurt so many people? Therefore, the crash was not the cause. It was more like a warning sign. The real damage came after, from something way less exciting, but way more deadly. The banks started collapsing. Money stopped moving, and the government made a series of decisions so bad that even the people who made them later admitted it. The Great Depression had more to do with what happened after World War I. European countries locked their currencies to gold at crazy, unrealistic rates. Trade flows broke down, and the entire global system was already cracked before 1929 even happened. The stock market crash just pushed everything over the edge. Caveman say, blaming the crash for the depression is like blaming the sneeze for the cold. The cold was already there. Number 2, the Federal Reserve literally admitted it was their fault. This one is wild. In 2002, over 70 years after the Depression, a man named Ben Bernanke, who was on the Federal Reserve Board at the time, stood up at a public event and said, on behalf of the Federal Reserve, "We did it. We're very sorry. We won't do it again." Caveman jaw drop. The Federal Reserve, the most powerful financial institution in the United States, admitted it turned what should have been a normal recession into a decade-long disaster. How? By not doing their one job. When banks started failing and money started disappearing from the economy, the Fed had the power to pump money back in and act as a safety net for the banking system. But instead of doing that, they watched. They did not lower interest rates fast enough. They did not flood the system with cash. They sat there while 1/3 of all American banks disappeared. Economists Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz later called this the Great Contraction. The money supply shrank by about 35%, which caused prices to collapse by 33%. That is deflation. And deflation in an economy is like a black hole. The less money there is, the less people spend, the more businesses close, the more people lose jobs, the less money there is. It feeds itself. Therefore, the Federal Reserve did not just fail to stop the Depression. According to multiple economists and the Fed's own admission, they helped create it. Number 3, Herbert Hoover was not the do-nothing president everyone says he was. Caveman has been lied to by history class. Everyone says Herbert Hoover just folded his arms and let the economy burn because he believed in the free market. That is not what happened. Here is the real story. Hoover actually intervened constantly. He pressured businesses to keep wages high. He signed massive tariffs. He created government loan programs. One of his top economic programs, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, was later copied almost entirely by Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. In fact, one of Roosevelt's own advisors later admitted, "We didn't admit it at the time, but practically the whole New Deal was extrapolated from programs that Hoover started." But here is the twist. Hoover's interventions made things worse, not better. His biggest mistake? In 1932, right in the middle of the Depression, he signed the Revenue Act of 1932. This law doubled the income tax for most Americans. The top tax bracket jumped from 24% to 63%, in the middle of an economic crisis. Caveman cannot believe this. You are going to raise taxes on everyone when people are already struggling to eat. Therefore, Hoover was not inactive. He was active in the worst possible ways. And the popular story of him being a hands-off president is almost entirely a myth. Number 4. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff was an economic catastrophe, and 1,000 economists begged Hoover not to sign it. Before Hoover signed the tax hike, he already committed one enormous error: the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. Here is what happened. Over 1,000 economists signed a letter and sent it directly to Hoover, asking him, begging him, not to raise tariffs on foreign goods. He signed it anyway. The tariff raised taxes on more than 20,000 imported products. The idea was to protect American businesses. But the moment Hoover announced he would sign it, the stock market dropped. On the actual day he said the words, "I shall approve the tariff bill," stocks lost $1 billion in value in a single afternoon. Then other countries hit back. Canada, Europe, everyone. They raised their own tariffs. American exports, which were about $5.2 billion in 1929, collapsed to $1.7 billion by 1933. Farmers lost nearly a third of their export markets overnight. A bushel of wheat that sold for $1 in 1929 was selling for 30 cents by 1932. Caveman smacked himself with rock. Therefore, the tariff did not protect anyone. It cut off America's ability to sell goods abroad, crushed farmers, and helped spiral the economy even deeper into the hole. Number 5. The gold standard trapped every country in a death spiral together. This is where it gets a little complicated, but Caveman will keep it simple. At the time, most countries tied the value of their money to gold. $1 equals this much gold. That sounds stable, right? But here is the problem. When the US economy started struggling, the Federal Reserve actually raised interest rates to protect the gold supply. Not to help the economy, to protect gold. This move rippled out to every other country that was also on the gold standard. When the US raised rates, other countries had to raise their rates too, or risk losing their own gold. So the entire world tightened its money supply at the same time, in the middle of a global economic crisis. Caveman, look around. Everyone broke. Everyone making it worse. The countries that recovered the fastest were the ones that abandoned the gold standard first and started printing more money. The longer a country stayed on gold, the longer they stayed in the depression. Therefore, the gold standard did not cause the depression, but it locked countries into policies that made recovery almost impossible until they walked away from it. Number 6. Between 1 and 2 million people of Mexican descent were deported. 60% were American citizens. This is one of the most forgotten stories of the entire era. As unemployment spread, American authorities started rounding up and deporting people of Mexican descent. Not just immigrants, American citizens, people born in the United States. The program was called Repatriation, which sounds polite, but researchers estimate that anywhere from 500,000 to nearly 2 million people were removed from the country, and approximately 60% of them were U.S. citizens. In Los Angeles, the welfare department was deporting hospital patients. One documented case involved a woman with leprosy who was driven to the border and left in Mexicali, Mexico. Others being removed had tuberculosis, paralysis, and mental illness. Orderlies literally carried patients out of medical facilities and sent them out of the country. California did not formally apologize for this until 2005. Caveman very quiet. Not funny, just true. Therefore, the human cost of the Depression was not just financial. It involved legal violations, forced removal of citizens, and suffering that took decades to even acknowledge. Number 7. Life expectancy actually went up during the Depression. Wait, what? This is one of the most counterintuitive facts in all of American economic history. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that between 1930 and 1933, the worst years of the Depression, population health generally improved. Mortality rates went down for almost every age group. Life expectancy increased. Caveman very confused. How does the worst economic disaster in history make people healthier? The researchers offered a few explanations. During economic booms, companies push workers hard. Long overtime hours, fast-paced work, new inexperienced workers getting hurt on the job more often, people sleeping less and drinking more. During a recession, that slows down. People are home more. Some harmful habits decrease. Workplace injuries drop. But here is the one exception. Suicide rates went up during the Depression. That was the only cause of death that increased. Therefore, the Depression was devastating in almost every way. But the relationship between economics and health is more complicated than most people think. Prosperity does not always equal better health. Number 8. Unemployment was still 17% in 1939. The New Deal did not end the Depression. Everyone knows the story. Franklin Roosevelt sweeps in, launches the New Deal, builds roads and dams, and saves America. Great story. But here is the complication. By 1939, a full 6 years into Roosevelt's presidency, unemployment in the United States was still around 17%. The Depression did not end with the New Deal. What actually ended it was World War II. When the U.S. entered the war, factory production exploded, young unemployed men were absorbed into the military, and women entered the workforce in massive numbers. The war did in 2 years what the New Deal could not do in 6. Some economists have even argued that certain New Deal policies, like the National Industrial Recovery Act, which set wages at levels too high for the struggling economy, may have extended the Depression by making it harder for businesses to hire workers. Caveman say, the New Deal helped a lot of people survive. The programs built real things. Roads, schools, hospitals. But ending the Depression? That was the war. Therefore, the popular version of the New Deal as the cure for the Depression is incomplete. The full recovery did not happen until 1942. Number 9. Americans were applying for jobs in the Soviet Union. In the early 1930s, one Soviet trading company based in New York was receiving an average of 350 job applications per day from Americans wanting to move to the Soviet Union to work. Caveman blink. Yes, Americans, living in the most powerful capitalist economy in the world, were so desperate that they were applying to work in a communist country. The Depression did not just cause poverty. It shook people's belief in the entire economic system. It made communism and socialism look like real alternatives to millions of people who were watching everything they knew collapse. This is one reason why the political map of the world shifted so dramatically in the 1930s. Not just in Germany, where unemployment hit nearly 30% and helped bring Hitler to power, but everywhere. Therefore, the Depression was not just an economic event. It was an ideological earthquake that changed how people thought about capitalism, government, and the role of the state for decades. Number 10. The Empire State Building was called the Empty State Building. Okay, Caveman needs a break from all the doom. Here is something strange. In 1930 and 1931, right in the middle of the Depression, workers built the Empire State Building. It opened in 1931 and became the tallest building in the world, a title it held until 1970. Its construction provided jobs for thousands of people at a time when work was almost impossible to find. But nobody wanted to rent space inside it. The building sat mostly empty for years. People called it the empty state building. The observation deck ticket sales became one of the only reliable sources of income for the building, because while businesses could not afford office space, tourists could afford to pay a small fee to look out from the top. Therefore, even in the middle of complete economic collapse, humans kept building things. And sometimes the building was done before anyone figured out what to do with it. Number 11. Dance marathons were a real thing people did to try to make money. This is one of those details that sounds made up but is completely real. During the Depression, dance marathons became a popular form of entertainment and desperate income opportunity. Contestants would dance, sometimes for days without stopping, with only very short breaks, hoping to outlast everyone else and win a cash prize. People in the audience would pay to watch. Sponsors would sometimes step in, and contestants, many of them genuinely hungry and broke, would push their bodies to the absolute limit just for a chance at prize money. This was not a small trend. Dance marathons happened across the country and drew real crowds. Caveman, think about this. People so desperate they choose to dance for 80 hours straight. That is a level of determination that is hard to put into words. Therefore, the Depression forced people into creative and sometimes extreme survival strategies. The desperation was real, and the lengths people would go to are a reminder of how completely the economic system had failed. Number 12. The layaway system was invented during the Depression. Here is one that still affects daily life today. When the economy collapsed, stores had a serious problem. People needed things but had no money. So retailers came up with a solution. A customer could pick out an item, make small payments on it over time, and take it home once it was fully paid off. No debt, no credit, just small payments until the full price was reached. That is layaway, and it was invented as a direct response to Depression-era poverty. It became a lifeline for both buyers who needed goods and businesses that needed sales to survive. The system spread quickly and became a standard part of retail for decades. Therefore, one of the most common retail tools still used today was born out of one of the worst economic disasters in American history. Sometimes necessity does produce real invention. The Federal Reserve admitted what they did. California apologized for the deportations 70 years later. And the New Deal, as helpful as it was for millions of people, did not end the Depression. The war did. These are the facts that most textbooks leave out. And now they are out. With that said, see you on the next video.